Oh, Kotaku. This video is going to be long enough as it is, so I'm not going to waste your guys' time rambling very much before it. But in case you're new here, hi, I'm Joe from Seattle. I like to respond to videos and articles that get gaming completely wrong, usually PC gaming, because that's my avenue of gaming, I guess. And I guess with the recent slew of horrible AAA PC ports, it was only a matter of time until Kotaku came out and I guess just blamed the gamers for it. Because what else were they going to do? It's Kotaku. Today's article is called PC Gamers Are Getting Angry at All the Wrong People by Luke Plunkett. And in case you thought the name Luke Plunkett was familiar, it's because he's one of the guys who lost his mind on Twitter after Kotaku was denied a review copy of Tears of the Kingdom. But more on that a little later. If you'd been even remotely connected to PC gaming over the last year or two, you'd have felt some heat radiating off the community, a rising sense of frustration that things are bad and just keep getting worse. Many PC gamers feel like they're reaching a breaking point, and it's hard not to sympathize. The PC gaming market has been hit by a number of perfect storms lately, and they all seem to have coalesced in 2023 to create a huge cloud of bad vibes. Bad vibes is capitalized for some reason, the effects of which are being felt especially at the pricier AAA end of the market. Here we have the earliest example of dishonest framing. The state of PC gaming is certainly on the rough side right now, but I would argue that the state of AAA gaming as a whole is rough right now. 2023 has had a ton of absolute stink bombs just all around, regardless of platform. High-profile games like Redfall and Jedi Survivor launched busted on all platforms, and while there have certainly been some abysmal PC ports this year, you can't tell me the state of console gaming is much better. Like, yeah, your shitty games aren't launching as broken as the PC versions, but you're still paying $70 for sub 30 FPS, so I don't think it's unfair of me to take some issue with the notion that this is just a PC problem, or it's just the PC side of gaming that's struggling. AAA gaming as a whole is in a really rough place right now, and while the issues are certainly magnified on the PC, just about everything you're about to talk about in this article they're universal industry issues, not PC-specific ones. But let's just move along and you'll see what I'm talking about pretty quickly here. First, the pandemic did an absolute number on graphics cards, sending Nvidia mad and leading to 3 years of releases and prices that were way beyond the pale for most reasonable folks. Then some blockbuster games dropped that didn't run very well. Then some more. Then more. Once beloved studios have been gutted by years of mismanagement and turnover, those two things are related. All the while, prices for games have crept up and DRM continues to haunt and adversely affect the performance of so many games. Again, a lot of those are just not PC exclusive issues. Yes, the pandemic did a serious number on GPU prices, but you were also paying upwards of $800 if you wanted a PS5 or Xbox Series X during that same time period. Because it wasn't just the PC that was impacted by hardware shortages and supply chain issues, that was everyone. And as for blockbuster games not running well, I could give you a laundry list of AAA games from the last 3 years that have run extremely poorly on the consoles. I mean, if you were on the PS4 or Xbox One over the last 3 years, you're lucky to get any new game running above 30 frames per second. And if you managed to get a 9th gen console, it's not like your performance was amazing. I'll agree that the early years of the PS5 and Series X were actually pretty promising, but in the last year or so, they've already started showing their age. Forspoken, Jedi Survivor, Gotham Knights, Battlefield 2042, Redfall, Plague Tale, Cyberpunk, pretty much every Call of Duty game to come out on those consoles, and that's not even mentioning all the Switch games with embarrassing performance for $60 or more. Again, the PC certainly has a lot of issues right now, but to act like it's the only place where these things are happening is dishonest as hell. And the article's only gonna get worse from here. Everything is bad, and gamers want someone to blame. So they take it out on supposed lazy developers. They take it out on QA, who should have caught those bugs. They crucify company executives who are only in the business to make a gamer's life worse. They even blame each other, pointing fingers at those who keep buying broken and bad games at launch, or even worse, before launch, which is only encouraging all this. Kotaku's main problem is that they seemingly do their best to take any problem in the industry and make it the gamer's fault. Like, if there's something gamers are upset about, it must be because the gamers are just being stupid or toxic. Like, read through this section again. They take it out on supposed lazy developers. Well, how else would you explain the rampant simplification of games? Remember when Elden Ring came out and a bunch of Western AAA developers were legitimately upset at the fact that it didn't use a bunch of their formulaic philosophies for game design? And Demion made a great video about that. I highly recommend watching it. But the moral of the story is, yes, a lot of AAA developers today are incredibly lazy, and anyone who's been playing video games for a decent stretch of time can confirm that. But what else do you list off here? They take it out on QA who should have caught those bugs. Yeah, that's their job. That's like if you were eating at a restaurant and your food was served to you on a dirty plate, but when you tried to criticize the dishwasher, Kotaku swooped in and punched you in the mouth. QA testers are literally there to look for bugs. So yeah, when games launch with massive, obvious, game-breaking bugs, I think it's entirely fair to criticize the QA. Oh boy, what do you say next? They crucify company executives who are only in the business to make a gamer's life worse. I mean, the wording there is a little generalizing, but yes, a lot of the things that gamers hate the most are only there because a bunch of big company executives who are only at the company to crunch numbers and maximize profits no matter how it impacts the art. How do you explain everything turning into a live service so quickly? But this last one you mentioned is the one that bugs me the most. They even blame each other, pointing fingers at those who keep buying broken and bad games at launch. Yes. If people keep buying broken games, we will keep getting broken games. How is this even up for debate? The fact that you try to frame this entire section as gamers just needing, quote, someone to blame, when this is objectively a massive part of the problem, is just, wow. If you continue to buy broken products will continue to be sold. This is not PC gamers needing someone to take their anger out on. This is PC gamers calling out an objectively dogshit part of the industry. Oh, but don't worry, it gets worse from here. There's an incoherence to the anger, though. Really? Because everything you listed about the anger was completely coherent, but you know, game journo's got a game journo. Punches being swung in the dark. There's a general tension, a sensation that the walls are closing in, that each day will bring a fresh new horror. Compounding this is an air of hopelessness that people have been complaining about these issues for months, years, decades to no avail. Parties and people are blamed, but nothing ever seems to stick or make a difference. But the need to punch something is there, so the punches keep flying regardless. This is my favorite game journalist tick. Game journalists are just not allowed to admit that gamers are actually right when they're upset about something. So when they talk about something where the gamers are actually in the right, they just have to act like there's nothing happening, which leads to gigantic contradictions like this one. Again, like I said a second ago, in the last screenshot, you listed off a bunch of things that there was nothing wrong with. You listed a bunch of very specific frustrations that PC gamers have, and then you immediately go into, oh, the punch is being swung in the dark. They just need to punch something. What? But also, you say here that people have been complaining about these issues for decades and nothing has changed, or they've complained for decades to no avail. And yet, at the beginning of the article, you said this anger was new to the last couple years. So you can't even keep your bullshit stories straight. Because that's what happens when you're just trying to discredit gamers and act as a human shield for corporations, because that's what this is. Kotaku literally can't be for the gamers anymore because they are so tied to gaming corporations and publishers and advertisers. They are literally incapable of accepting the fact that gamers are upset for perfectly valid reasons, because then they would have to go against their corporate overlords and potentially lose one of those juicy sponsorships. And if you think I'm exaggerating about that, just look at the reactions these people had to Nintendo not giving them a review copy for Tears of the Kingdom. Their whole world was shattered. And yeah, that's the writer of this very article. Told you we'd come back to this specimen. Kotaku's entire identity is tied to the big companies, so it really shouldn't be surprising that they hate gamers as much as they do. But let's just move along with this article, because believe it or not, it still gets worse. It can feel like every major PC release is bad, but complicating matters is the fact that no two bad releases are bad for quite the same reasons. The Last of Us is a bad port, not a bad game. Cyberpunk's woes stemmed as much from unfocused game direction as bugs. Battlefield 2042 was pushed out in the middle of a global pandemic. God, this is so fucking apologetic, I can't stand it. Star Wars Jedi Survivor seems to run just fine for loads of people, but not for those with the best hardware, who are also the most likely to complain about it online. Redfall feels like a game made to fulfill a contractual obligation, not because anyone at Arcane actually thought it was any good. This is what I was talking about earlier, how you seem to think that the PC is the only platform with issues. Of the 5 games you listed here, 4 of them were busted on the consoles as well. But the main difference is the fact that the console versions were universally busted, while the PC versions were busted for a percentage of people, because generally speaking, busted PC ports won't be busted for everyone because of all the variations in the hardware. And that's certainly not an excuse for the port being busted. I'm just pointing this out because I find it incredibly ironic that you throw shade at the PC versions of Cyberpunk and Battlefield as if those games weren't borderline unplayable on the consoles. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when the console version of Cyberpunk was literally pulled from sale because it was so broken. I'm also old enough to remember when the PS5 version of Jedi Survivor got down to 972p while capped at 30 frames per second, or a whopping 648p while capped at 60. This entire section is so dismissive and apologetic of corporations, but like fucking what else is new? It's Kotaku. I also love this bit here where you say Jedi Survivor runs fine for loads of people, but has performance issues for people using higher end hardware. Like, bro, you literally just pulled that from EA's apology statement. And it was bullshit when they said it too. I love it when people repeat the nonsense that Jedi Survivor was only busted for people with higher end PC hardware, when the game was literally fundamentally broken at its core. I point you towards this video by Oh No, It's Alex because he goes into the exact things wrong with Jedi Survivor on a technical level. And I also recommend this video by SkillUp because it also gives a good look at what's going on with this game in motion on PC. But long story short, there are fundamental things wrong with this game's programming and is absolutely not limited to people with higher end hardware. But I'm not surprised Kotaku just literally copy pasted whatever EA said because it's fucking Kotaku, and anything more than that would involve them having critical thinking skills. The problem is games being rushed out before they're finished, before they're properly tested on a wide range of hardware. The problem is that a new console generation, the PS5's architecture especially, has presented a fresh set of challenges to multi-platform developers and port studios alike. The problem is that game development is getting more and more expensive. The problem is that management at major publishers and graphics card manufacturers are beholden to shareholders who demand constant growth, and the only way to ensure that is to increase profits while slashing costs. The problem is that video games are really hard to make. You realize that none of those problems are unable to coexist with everything you dismissed like 2 paragraphs ago, right? Like, yeah, all of those things you just said are problems, absolutely. But so are all the other things that you completely dismissed as PC gamers just needing to punch someone. It's almost like the state of AAA gaming is a fucking embarrassment. I also love how a couple minutes ago you deliberately dismissed the idea that gaming execs are making things worse, but here you say that management is a problem. So which one is it? Call me crazy, but I think games like Hogwarts Legacy, Elden Ring, the RE4 and Dead Space remakes, fucking Hi-Fi Rush, even Dead Island 2 to a certain degree, they kind of shit all over this idea that the industry is universally fucked. And I know I said things are fucking embarrassing. That was a little bit of hyperbole on my part. If you're a regular viewer of this channel, I think you're used to that. But things are not universally fucked. It's just a lot of high-profile players are getting fucking lazy. Hogwarts Legacy's especially a good example that I think things are savable and that things are not totally fucked. That game was in development hell for the longest time, and yet it turned out better than anyone was expecting it to be, and it sold fucking incredibly. Obviously not without issues. I know it had some technical hiccups at launch, but Hogwarts Legacy should be proof that the industry isn't completely gone. Same with Dead Space and RE4, 2 remakes that were raging successes and ran excellently, reviewed excellently. They were better than they had any right to be. And I don't think I even need to talk about Elden Ring at this point. Like, everyone knows how much of a success that game was. I mean, the Dead Island 2 PC port was great. I don't know why it was great, but it was. I'll take it. The AAA side of the industry has a lot of problems right now, but they're not universal to everyone involved, and that gives me hope for the future. There's no reason to be so pessimistic about this. Continuing with this article, like I said, a perfect storm. That's a lot of things to be trending downwards at the same time, making it easy to sympathize with a disgruntled PC gamer at the moment, or at least those interested in the blockbuster side of the market. But earlier in this article, you were dismissing literally every criticism that they have. Oh my god. Smaller games from smaller teams using less resources aren't anywhere near as impacted by all this. I say this because I am also primarily a PC gamer, and also very upset about this, the graphics card bullshit especially, but also because I empathize with the frustration that there doesn't seem to be any way out of this. Well, actually, the way out of this is to stop buying broken games. The thing that you dismissed earlier in this video as PC gamers just needing someone to punch. You realize that you don't have to buy things you don't want, right? And if a game is broken or bad, you probably shouldn't want it. Like, just don't buy broken products. Don't give your money to companies that are trying to take advantage of you, and things will get back on track. It really is that simple. It's going to be kind of frustrating in the meantime, sure, but it'll get better. And it's not like PC gamers are starved of content, or like that we don't have any games to play in the meantime while we're waiting for things to get fixed. Some of these problems can be resolved in due time, the console porting stuff especially. I feel like a lot of people feeling angry at bad PC versions of console games right now weren't around 10 to 15 years ago when multi-platform releases on PC were just as bad, if not worse. Console generations don't always sync up neatly with advances in PC horsepower, which leads to messy ports. We've been here before. We'll get through this, as Twitch streamer Casey Explosion sums up here, and then a tweet from Casey Explosion that I'll just throw on screen here if you want to pause and read it. Lame PC ports have always been a thing, sure, but I'm going to say what I always say, which is that a lame PC port is almost always hitting the performance of its console counterpart, if not dramatically better. In the past, a PC port was often lame because it wasn't using the PC to the fullest, or not because it was actually broken or, technically bloated or held back by the main problems that modern PC ports are dealing with. But I want to bring up games like Dead Island 2 and Dead Space again, because if they can figure this out, why can't other companies? Doom Eternal is probably my personal poster child for a great PC port, minus the stupid anti-cheat software that was in there at launch. Doom Eternal runs phenomenally on PC. I was playing that game on a GTX 1070 at max settings and still getting like 70 FPS on average. And again, Dead Island 2 was in development hell for the longest time, and yet it had one of the best AAA PC ports in a while. It's hard to make the argument that PC ports are universally bad for some universal reason when there are such obvious high-profile examples of that not being true. And I know this is kind of besides the overall point of the video and the article, but he made a weird aside here, so I'm making a weird aside to respond to it. At the end of the day, lame PC ports are not a new thing, yes, but the reasons behind them are new, and that's what's different. A lot of modern PC ports are just bloated and very lazily programmed, and again, I'll point you to Oh No, It's Alex's port review series if you want exact tech breakdowns on these kinds of things, because he can explain that shit way better than I can. But the reason I'm sticking on this topic for as long as I am is because there are universal issues with AAA games in this regard. Many 9th gen console games have embarrassing performance issues as well, and it feels like the industry as a whole, at least on the AAA side of things, is really starting to lose its way. There are PC-specific issues, absolutely, but the rollover between PC game issues and console game issues are getting greater and greater, and that's a serious issue. To act like the issues with AAA gaming are limited to the PC side of things is, frankly, absolving the people at fault of responsibility, and that's why I'm taking issue with it. Continuing. The rest, though, they're all just a part of wider trends, which have been sliding this way for decades, but are seemingly only now at the point where gamers have moved from being upset to being truly angry. EA and Activision shareholders aren't ever going to collectively decide, okay, that's enough growth, we're good now. The bigger and more expensive video game budgets get, a natural consequence of gaming's own insatiable need for expansion and graphical fidelity and world size, the more those publishers chasing growth are going to squeeze us on things like retail prices, season passes, DRM, and downloadable content. And so long as Nvidia controls so much of the graphics card market, they'll be free to do and charge what they want. This is, again, an incredibly pessimistic view on things. I mean, I really can't blame you because things are really frustrating, and that obviously leads to pessimism. That's only human. But you seem to think there's no way out of this. As if those shareholders you hold in such contempt won't demand change once money stops flowing. In the world of business, the shareholders have a lot of influence, and when the company they're invested in starts losing its way and making stupid decisions that reduce profits, they will demand change. This has happened countless times with companies of all sizes, so while you're right about EA and Activision constantly trying to make things bigger and bigger, that really isn't going to mean shit if profits aren't up, and if people don't buy these things. When you look at the 9th generation of AAA games, the most acclaimed releases have been things like Elden Ring, Hi-Fi Rush, the Dead Space remake, the RE4 remake, Hogwarts Legacy, games that are not gigantic budget bloaters. Meanwhile, the gigantic budget bloaters like Forspoken and Saints Row and Redfall have completely flopped. Shit, even Call of Duty is losing its way pretty dramatically. And if you don't think shareholders are going to take notice of that, you're seriously mistaken. It all comes back to supporting the projects that deserve support, and not supporting the things that aren't worth it. Trying to blame developers, platforms, companies, or even individual executives is like yelling at clouds. You think Andrew Wilson is doing terrible things as EA's CEO? I guarantee you the next person taking his place will do exactly the same shit. He and every other person in a leadership position at a major video game company are simply doing their jobs to the letter. The only thing every factor listed above has in common is that they're all issues produced by and indebted to a system designed to bleed you dry in the name of ever-expanding growth. God, like, dude, you work for Kotaku. How is the irony flying past you? You work for Kotaku. Every major company is getting squeezed by shareholders, and so that company's management will continue in turn to squeeze its own workers and then squeeze you harder and harder, because that's how this all works. Not if you just don't engage with it. You realize you don't have to buy something that you don't want. Endless growth doesn't appear in a vacuum. It comes from increased gains and reduced expenditure, or in video games, an industry as defined by layoffs as it is record profits, both at the same time. Again, with the radioactive pessimism, like the answer is in the question here. You said it yourself. Increased gains and reduced expenditure. So instead of giant overblown projects that end up flopping, we should be getting more small-scale, refined experiences like the stuff that has already been doing so well in the last few years that you conveniently forget about. This isn't hard to understand, and it's not even the first time in the industry that we've been in a place like this. Remember the early to mid-2010s around the launch of the Xbox One and PS4? AAA gaming was in a very similar place then. There was an over-reliance on franchise games and reboots with giant marketing budgets despite the actual quality of games being low. The era of soulless franchise games, cash grabs, and new Assassin's Creed games coming out every 5 seconds, of Call of Duty losing its way, Halo beginning its downfall. Like, the early years of the 8th console gen were really similar to the current state of the industry, and people fucking hated it, which led to the second half of the 2010s being kind of a revival of the AAA industry, because the major players realized they had to actually put some fucking effort into their projects. Which is why the late 2010s had so many fucking bangers like Doom, Cuphead, Spider-Man, RE7, RE2, Sekiro, DMC5, Jedi Fallen Order. Like, the late 2010s were a golden age because the early 2010s demanded better. We've been here before. It's not the end of the world. It's just going to be really frustrating until things are fixed. So, hold your ground. Don't buy shitty games. Don't stop criticizing things that deserve to be criticized. And we'll get this back on track, I promise. There's no escape from this. I fucking hate this, oh my god. The machine is doing exactly what it was designed to do, hoping for some kind of AAA miracle that every executive at every major publisher and hardware manufacturer is going to have a collective epiphany and take things back to whatever way you think they were, is the definition of insanity. This is the same guy that lost his shit because Kotaku didn't get a Tears of the Kingdom review code. Like, really? Like, are you still not over the mental breakdown of that? What happens when Tears of the Kingdom comes out and it's good? Like, are you just not going to accept that? There's no way to get around blockbuster PC gaming's downward trend other than bailing on it altogether and taking solace in the fact that, unlike most other platforms, the PC is actually capable of supporting the diverse and thriving independent development scene, largely thanks to Steam, whose business model is a whole other story. Obligatory games journalist bashing Steam for literally no reason. Because the only message a games company hears when its broken games sell are that its broken games will sell. Gee, if only there was a way to stop that. I get that people are angry, but it might be time to stop getting angry at the trees and try getting angry at the forest instead. And if that doesn't make you feel better, you can always just walk away from the woods. I'm struggling to make words right now because are you fucking serious? Earlier in this article, you dismissed people getting upset with people buying broken games, even though that's literally what you imply we should do right now. But earlier in this video, you dismissed people with perfectly legitimate criticisms of the industry, but then you just said that if it's time to stop getting angry or walk away from the, what are you saying here? Are you saying that if you're upset about the state of things and we're not criticizing them in the exact way you think they should be criticized, we should just leave? Because that's what it sounds like you're saying. And you're a fucking dick if that's what you're saying. Look, the state of PC gaming right now is not as great as it could be. I still think PC is the best platform by a fucking landslide. I think this is a brief hiccup, and we're going to get through this. We always do, because the shit that they're shoveling at us is not selling. So of course it's not going to stick around. There's going to be some layover time. Like, brace yourself, we're not out of the woods yet, because companies have gotten fucking lazy, which means everything that's in production basically has a decent percentage chance of being a piece of shit when it comes out. But 2-3 years from now, assuming we hold our ground, we should be out of this. Because despite you being so dismissive of the gaming industry's, insatiable need for growth, yeah, if it doesn't grow, it won't persist. So don't let it grow and we'll be fine. You talk like this is the fucking apocalypse. This is just an open marketplace doing its thing. And also, I find it interesting, Mr. Kotaku writer, that you're now so fucking befuddled as to how the gaming industry became so complacent with mediocrity. Isn't it interesting that the Kotaku writer now has a problem with mediocrity? I got a Discord notification. I hope you didn't hear it. I'm not going to redo that part because I'm tired and my voice is hurting and I'm sweaty. AAA gaming as a whole is in a weird place because some of the big players think they can get away with anything. But there are other players in the AAA scene who are proving that that's not true. Support them, don't support the people taking advantage of you. End of story, and we'll get through this. Toodles.